Buenas, bienvenidos a este vídeo de unplandivino.net y vamos a ver esto que tenemos en pantalla, un mensaje muy breve que va a hablar de las verdades más grandes, que puede parecer anecdótico el mensaje, pero ahora lo vamos a ver y saludo a Claudia, gracias, que me acompaña para grabar esto. ¿Qué tal?
Gracias, Iván. Bien, muy dispuesta a escuchar, así que no digo ansiosa, aunque capaz sí, quizás haya un poco de deseo ahí. Sí.
Claro, yo también. Sí, esto parece como es un poco folclórico aquí que nos ponemos con este nombre de Salomón, pero en realidad vamos a ver el tema de la fe y en el siguiente veremos el tema de la oración y lo van a conversar de forma muy interesante. Mary, vamos a ver que realmente se pone a sentir cosas, se le caen algunas fichas en algún momento. De hecho, este mensaje, fíjate, voy a poner aquí un momento en pantalla, está dividido en 2 vídeos, pero porque tuvieron que pararlo a los 40 minutos. Tampoco es que sea muy dramático, ni que se vea mucho, ni que nada, ¿vale? No nos hagamos una idea. Pero la cosa es que para parar un poco a procesar una emoción, pues Mary, tuvieron que pararlo. Y bueno, si le damos aquí al mensaje, ahora lo vamos a ver, la traducción que me ha salido, ¿no? Pues es así, es solo esto. Ahora lo vamos a ver, pero quizás solo podemos comentar una vez que lo lea y luego ya seguimos leyendo y escuchando lo que va a decir la conversación entre María Magdalena y Jesús, que es o sea, lo comentamos solo cuando eso y luego ya, de corrido lo escuchamos, la conversación, que vamos a tener además que parar un momento para ir al otro vídeo, porque continúa ahí el tema de la fe. Y después comentaremos cosas nosotros si tenemos aún si nos surge. Bueno, ya digo, vamos a pararlo, comentar solo un poquito, espero, por comentar así que no parezca muy raro esto de darle un poco de sentido a esto de un mensaje hace 100 años, ¿no? A través de Padgett, a través del cual habló Jesús, recordemos, este señor, que es una serie de mensajes enorme y desconocida, como es tan importante y contiene tanta verdad tan importante para la humanidad, por eso es tan desconocida en gran medida, parece, ¿no? Ha sido rehuida, pero hemos rehuido de ello. Bueno, vamos allá, sin más preámbulos, venga.
Ok.
Good afternoon. It is afternoon here where we are, at least, isn't it, Dale?
It is.
And again, we wanted to discuss another Padgett message with you today. And so what we've chosen is a very short and succinct message by Solomon on the 20th of April 1916 that he gave it. And the subject of the message is, what are the greatest truths in all the world? And it's a very short, direct message, but you're going to find that it could probably take an hour or so to discuss it because there's so much involved in his statements about the truth that is discussed in this message. So what we'd probably like to do is read the entire message first, I feel, and then we can then bring out the different points with the discussion. So I thought perhaps I would read the message and then we'll proceed. Solomon of the Old Testament. I come only to say that very soon I desire to write you another message, conveying to you some great truth of the Father. I will not write more now, but will soon come. And then Padgett asks, what is the greatest thing in all the world? Prayer and faith on the part of mortals, and love, the divine love, on the part of God. The latter is waiting, and the former causes it to enter into the souls of men. No other truths are so great and momentous to men. Let what I say sink deep into your memory and try the experiment. I know you do try, but try and then try and never cease trying. Love will come to you, and with it faith, and then knowledge, and then ownership. I could write for a long time, yet I must not, as you are tired. So with my love and blessings, I will say good night, and may the Father's love take possession of you. Your brother in Christ, Solomon. So very short message.
Yeah, it's actually probably my favourite message.
In the Padgett messages?
Yeah. Out of all the messages.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think because it's so, the message is so crystallised and beautiful, and if I could master the prayer and faith.
Bueno, ese comentario que te iba a decir. Muchas personalidades hablaron a través de Padgett, y esto es el personaje bíblico, ¿no? Y si te das cuenta, empieza diciéndole que no, que ya le va a mandar otro mensaje. Aquí ya estamos en 1916, por lo tanto Padgett está un poco cansado. No sé si Salomón en realidad cuando dice cansado se refiere a que él puede ver como guía celestial que será, suponemos. Él puede ver realmente el estado de Padgett con respecto a la confianza o a desconfianza sobre los temas y sobre el hecho de que puedan hablar a través de tantas personalidades tan raras, ¿no? Y tan antiguas. Y entonces yo creo que va por ahí el tema del cansancio, pero Padgett, antes de que se vaya, bueno, eso no es un suponer mío, ¿no? Eso no lo van a comentar ahora. Pero antes de que se vaya, fíjate, le pregunta, bueno, ¿y qué es lo más grande del mundo, no? Y eso, le dice simplemente esas tres cosas.
Sí,
Vamos
sí.
a
Eso
ver,
quería.
la respuesta otra vez, suponemos, y seguimos. Bueno, retrocedo un poco y seguimos por aquí.
Yeah. Which is so and favourite message.
In the Padgett messages?
Yeah.
Father's love take possession of you. Your brother in Christ, Solomon. A very short message.
Yeah, it's actually probably my favourite message.
In the Padgett messages?
Yeah, out of all the messages.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think because it's so, the message is so crystallised and beautiful, and if I could master the prayer and faith,
I feel it's one of the most misunderstood messages in the entire Padgett messages as well.
Which is why I'm really excited to talk to you about it.
Yeah. I feel that it's misunderstood from the point of view, from many different points of view, but the first point of view that it's very misunderstood is the importance of prayer. I just feel that most people, when they hear about praying for divine love, still do not understand the importance of prayer and what prayer actually does to the soul and what prayer for love does in terms of transformation of the soul. And I also feel it's important in the sense that it highlights the most important thing we can receive from God. A lot of people are seeking truth, but the reality is they're not seeking this primary truth, and that is the most important thing that you could ever receive is love from God. That is the transformation, that is the thing that causes transformation of the human soul. You can try to transform your soul using all other methods or find out lots of other truths if you want, but the reality is this is the most important thing you can receive. And I feel that most people who listen to it still don't understand that. They're still seeking truth about this subject or that subject or whatever it is that they are trying to get truth about, and still not understanding that the greatest, single greatest truths are this love that can come from God that transforms your soul, and what you need to do to actually have this love enter your soul, to receive it.
Yeah.
And if people understood this truth better, they would spend less of their time arguing or seeking other types of knowledge, metaphysical or other types of knowledge. They would even probably stop seeking it, searching for it, cease altogether, and focus only, if they understood the true importance of receiving divine love into the soul, they would seek only for that first. And it would become, as I said in the first century, you'd seek that first and all these other things would be added to you, and they would understand that. But I feel the majority of people do not understand it. So this is one reason why we'd like to discuss it together in detail.
And in this message, Solomon says to Padgett, try the experiment. And that's
and then
something,
try and keep trying.
Keep trying. And maybe we can point out what the experiment is, which is really something that we've talked about in other discussions, where Padgett has encouraged his spirit friends to experiment with the idea that if there is a God who loves me, then I would ask for that love. And Solomon is basically saying, just as you've said, that's the greatest thing you can ever try to
Aquí, tal como has dicho tú, Noah.
do. And when you do, it's going to change you. Love will come to you, and then faith, and then knowledge and ownership. And I just find that so beautiful, the way he's been able to say it so clearly. What's going to happen if we just have these two qualities?
Yeah.
Or two actions, I suppose.
Yeah, so perhaps we can talk firstly about the importance of God's love and what it does to the soul, because that is the thing that comes from God, and what Solomon says is the greatest thing that comes from God. And I would agree with that. The greatest thing that I've experienced from God is this love that comes from God. It transforms everything else. It gives you all knowledge in the end as well. If you put it into practice in your day-to-day life, all other knowledge comes to you as well. So if we really valued it, we would place it as a high priority in our life. In fact, if we valued it to its worth, in other words, if we valued God's love to what God's love was actually worth, we would find that we'd be spending a lot less time doing mundane things in our day-to-day life and a lot more time developing this relationship with God than the majority of us are doing. So this, I feel, indicates that for the majority of us, we do not value God's love, and we do not understand its transformational nature upon the soul. And instead what we do is we're still self-reliant, we're still relying on some effort on our behalf, and as a result we often get very distracted. We often go off into searching for other truths rather than focusing all of our attention on this one main truth, and then allowing all the other truths to come to us as time goes on. As we receive the love, more and more of these truths will come to us. And I feel that for the majority of people who've heard the message of divine truth, there is still a focus on all of the truth without there being a major focus on all of the love that we can receive from God, because it's not the truth that transforms us. And we need to understand that. We need to get that it's not truth that transforms us. It opens the doorway to transforming us, but it isn't the truth itself that transforms us. It's love that transforms us, and it's not our own love that transforms us. It's God's love entering the soul that transforms us. And we need to understand the importance of receiving God's love in our day-to-day life if we truly want to become more loving individuals.
So can you then describe this? You're saying God's love transforms us.
Mm-hmm.
Can you explain what happens? What is this transformation that happens?
Well, when God's love, which is a part really, or a part of God's nature and character, and as we've said in the Padgett messages, it's a part of the substance of God, mm-hmm. because it belongs to God. It doesn't belong to us. It belongs to God. So when we receive divine love into our soul, a part of God now exists within our soul for the very first time. If it's the very first time we've received it, it'll be the very first time in our entire existence that a part of God exists in our soul. Now, a lot of people argue that we're all made with a part of God, and I can't agree with that. We are all made with characteristics and attributes that are loving, and God has placed these characteristics and attributes in us, but they belong to us initially without being a part of God. And God made the material that makes up our body, and made the material that makes up our spirit body, and made the material that makes up our soul. But they are just creations of God that have their own purpose and their own mechanisms. Mm-hmm. They operate independently of God. And God created it that way because otherwise we wouldn't have free will. When we receive divine love, it's completely different. We now are receiving a part of God's very substance, the love that belongs to God, which is an emotion that God has, but it's also a substance that enters our soul and starts transforming the soul into a different type of, having different type of characteristics. And it physically transforms the soul as well as spiritually transforms it. And it does it by operating upon, this love causes different operations to begin inside of the human soul. Mm-hmm. So before, we were only ever able to progress to the perfect natural man after we receive some divine love. Now we have the potentiality of receiving more and more of this love that transforms us into being a completely different kind of creature, which is why I called it in the first century the new birth, being born again. You're born from being just a man, born of a mother and a father, if you like, the soul created by God, but unindividualized before you incarnate. When it incarnates, it individualizes, but it still isn't conscious of the fact that it's got a part of God in it, because the reality is it does not have a part of God in it at that point, mm-hmm. with the exception of that God formed the materials that made up the soul.
But they aren't actually made from God's substance, are they?
No, they're God formulating material from the universe, formulating materials to create our soul and create a spirit body, create our physical body, but a part of God's actual substance doesn't exist in the human. Yeah. So this whole concept that, we are all divine sparks of God is a very flawed concept, because the reality, and I feel the earth we're living on is proof that we're not all we're not all divine sparks of God at all, because you see the results of the world that we live in, and you see quite plainly that if we're all divine sparks of God, then God must be a pretty harsh and unloving person. So, but once we start receiving divine love into our soul, now a part of God enters us. Uh-huh. For the very first time in our existence, we have the potential for immortality. And once we've become at one with God's love that enters us and continues to enter us to the point where every choice and every decision we make is in harmony with the law, mm-hmm. then we're at one with God. And once we become at one with God, now we are also completely immortal. We can never, our soul, not our spirit body or our physical body, but our soul can never die. It can never be passed away. It can never be transformed into something lesser than what it currently is.
Just to clarify, though, you're saying a part of God has entered us.
Yes.
But this is not a process of us becoming God, is it?
No.
This, when we become at one with God, it's not saying that so much of God has entered us that we are God, is it?
Well, I suppose if you look at the very furthest potential in terms of receiving divine love, it is possible that somehow we become a part of God. However, nobody has ever experienced that. There's no spirit who's ever experienced that, or any person on earth has ever experienced that. And so the reality is we don't know what the future will be receiving divine love. All we know at this point in time is that divine love transforms us into a completely new creature with completely new potentials. And these potentials are not, it's like God is gifting new gifts to our soul that we didn't have as a part of our original potential, but God created the soul able to expand under the condition of receiving divine love. It's only under that condition. And our will has to be engaged in that. It's not something that's automatic. We're not automatically divine. We've got to engage our will. We've got to decide that we want to become such through this relationship with God. And by divine, I don't mean that we become God. I mean that we have part of God's divinity within us because we have a part of God's love within us. The substance of God has entered our soul and transformed it.
Okay, so, and this will part, that's the prayer and faith that we're going to talk about later, isn't it? But just if you could speak a little bit more about this transformation. You say we become at one with God, but what begins to happen initially that we start to receive God's love? There's a change that's happening and part of God is entering us. But what in effect is, are things leaving us? What's changing within us?
Well, nothing leaves us when we receive divine love without our choice being involved. So in other words, when we receive love from God, nothing will leave us. No errors will leave us. No truth can enter us unless our will is engaged. And this is where I feel a lot of people do not understand the principle of receiving divine love. They want more love, but oftentimes they receive some. If you look at most religious faiths, there is a connection to God in some places. And so they receive some divine love, but then their belief systems and their will is exercised to reject more love, to stop having love come into the soul. Or they reject living in harmony with the love that has already entered their soul. And if they do that, then they'll have quite a lot of pain and suffering in their life still as a result of that. What we need to do is engage this process of continuing to receive the love and releasing from us the influences and beliefs and emotions and passions and desires within us that give us have a tendency towards rejection of the love and have a tendency towards rejection of the truth, and we need to let those go, but it needs to be a process that is actively engaged by our will. We can't expect to just have divine love keep coming to us while at the same time we continue to operate and act out of harmony with it and have continued reception of divine love. The divine love has, because of the substance of it, because it comes from God, it has an underlying responsibility, if you like, and the underlying responsibility is that we start acting in harmony with it in order to receive more. Right? So that's a part and parcel of the reception of divine love. But it's the divine love that actually transforms the soul. Nothing else does.
In what way does it transform the soul?
Well, physically it transforms the soul from just the perfect natural man, or from the normal soul that we're created, and by softening it into a different type of soul. It actually is a different type of soul. And in fact, the spirits in the spirit world, when you speak to them who haven't received divine love, they actually believe that the souls of those who have received divine love are different souls. And while it's not true that it's not available to everybody, because it is, they believe that it must be a different soul, because when they look at the spirit body of the individuals who have received divine love and they feel them, they can feel that there's something completely different in these people compared to themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And so they then start judging it as, oh, it must be that God created two types of souls.
Sure.
And that's how they explain to themselves.
So you're saying physically the spiritual body begins to reflect the changes that are inside the soul, and that's what spirits are seeing?
Yes, but I'm also saying that the soul itself, the physicality of the soul itself, changes on the reception of divine love.
Mm-hmm.
The soul changes its substance and form
Mm-hmm.
for the very first time. If you never receive divine love, there will not be this change.
Mm-hmm.
That you'll continue to grow, and you eventually become the perfected natural man sometime in your future in the spirit world, in the sixth dimension. You'll be very happy perhaps in that state, but you'll never experience any further growth.
Mm-hmm.
And it's impossible, in fact, to experience any further growth without receiving divine love above the sixth dimension.
Mm-hmm.
What we need to do is understand that receiving divine love is the beginning of all soul-based transformation, really. Because even if you grow in natural love, transformation can occur, but it halts at the sixth dimension.
Mm-hmm.
It cannot continue.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why it cannot continue is because the soul that hasn't received divine love hasn't been transformed into this new creature that has the ability to exponentially grow and change and infinitely grow and change.
Mm-hmm.
That's the effect that divine love has upon the soul. It allows now the soul, so it's sort of almost like a key that you can put into the soul, yeah, and transform it from being one type of vehicle, if you like, yeah, to a completely different type of vehicle with a completely jet different potentiality.
Yeah.
Well, I wouldn't even call it jet propulsion. I'd say it's like a completely different vehicle altogether. It's like comparing a motor car with a 747 jet plane, sure, you know, like in the sense of comparison and intricacies that can be developed within the soul. One is, in comparison, although look quite complex, is quite simple in comparison to the other. Divine love causes the transformation of the physical soul. It also, the way that it does it is by the substance of God entering the soul and opening up all of these different possibilities that God created, potentialities in the soul that cannot be opened by anything other than love, that God's love.
Right.
So that's how it does it. When divine love is experienced in the soul, it opens up. It's like this underlying substance, if you like, that causes a hole there, a new hole there, and a new growth 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 there. And all of a sudden, the soul is now growing in all these different areas that all had to have a certain key put in them, which is just the divine love is the key to it all. Had to have the key put into it in order for that growth to occur. If divine love is not received, none of that growth can ever occur, physically ever.
Right. So, thinking now of me back here, I'm not at one with God yet. In fact, I'm very in my infancy, the second time around, in receiving God's love.
Yeah.
And so when you're talking about this...
I can't agree with those statements, but go on.
Well, how would you differ with those statements?
Well, there is other messages which we'll discuss in the future, how a person can act out of harmony with the love they've already received. And the reality is you have been acting out of harmony with the love you've already received, which is a very different operation than the person receiving divine love for the first time.
Yes, and so... maybe we should just give a hypothetical then.
Okay, let's go for the hypothetical.
Yes, because obviously I have received God's love to the point of one with God in the past. And now I'm back here.
And the soul, our soul still is in that condition.
Yes.
Even though you might not be conscious of the condition.
Hasn't lost the love. And sometimes a lot of the pain I experience is because I am acting in disharmony with what I can already, there's already a soul sense in me of what is loving.
Exactly. So comparing yourself or asking questions about yourself is probably not something for the general public to benefit from. I feel what we need to do is ask questions about what's it like about receiving it for the first time or continually receiving it after you've received it a little bit.
So now, I'm Joe Blogs, who's never received.
Esto te quería preguntar si estás por ahí con el micro abierto. Usan un nombre como esto de soy fulano o mengano, no sé si lo usáis ahí así.
Sí, sí, sí.
Claro, y luego le añaden el blogs, que no he querido mirar mucho, o sea, no he mirado mucho de si es un nombre que usan mucho y no lo sé, igual que nosotros usamos fulano o mengano, no sé qué. La cosa es que ella dispone un nombre de un cualquiera y pone Joe Blogs, creo que dice eso, ahora no me acuerdo si de Joe. Luego lo cambia a uno de mujer, claro. No sé si el primero o es Joan, no me acuerdo. La cosa es que, bueno, es intraducible, como comprenderás, como todo en el idioma en general, pero porque no es lo mismo para nada criarse, ¿verdad? Pero eso es otro tema. Entonces, como le añaden eso de blogs, que no sé si es un apellido o qué, pero bueno, como suena a blog, pues sin mirar más, pues he dicho, bueno, pues hacemos esta broma. Que a lo mejor es la que están refiriéndose. No es exactamente el plural de blogs, porque creo que tiene 2 Gs o algo así, pero tampoco creo que sea un apellido muy normal. Yo no sé, tampoco he visto millones de apellidos en inglés, ni mucho menos. No soy de allí ni conozco, pero hemos visto algunos, ¿no? Entonces no sé, es muy raro. Entonces a lo mejor sí que hacen una referencia cómica al tema de Internet o no. No lo sé.
Sí, así lo entendí yo, sí.
Claro.
O sea, mi hipótesis era esa, como youtuber, así la palabra como que, sí, pero que
entonces,
no sé por qué bloguera, sí. Bueno.
Pero vamos, que se puede ir a ver bueno, a ver si le añado el nombre que han elegido en inglés, pero bueno, es lo de menos. Sí, soy eso.
Okay.
Pero fulana y mengana se usa allí, ¿no?
Sí, 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 totalmente, con frecuencia, constantemente.
Vale, porque sí, como el español cambia tanto según el país, que está muy interesante, como ya hemos dicho muchas veces, tener información de muchos lados. Bueno, pues vamos a seguir hoy.
Dale.
Jody Blogs.
Jody Blogs. Joanne Blogs.
Pues aquí se lo cambia a Jody, no sé qué, pero son nombres todos, que la broma yo no la pillo muy bien porque es la broma.
You're talking about this transformation.
Que aquí me he inventado eso, añadirle un mengana, pero por decir algo.
Of the soul. Now, Mary Magdalene, know more about what you're talking about, but if I was hearing this for the first time,
Bueno, es que no he dicho, se me ha olvidado, que también lo pongo por si acaso hacen referencia, que no lo sé, a que ella tenía ese blog, que luego lo pasó a la web, y Jesús le decía, oye, pero, o sea, ¿para qué quieres tener tanto un blog y que la gente te dé la aprobación o no, no sé qué, no sé cuántas cosas de esas que tuvieron una conversación sobre ello y cosas así? No porque no quisieran que dar información no sé qué, sino para ver la motivación verdadera, ¿no? Entonces yo no sé si hace referencia a eso. Por eso lo he puesto también.
Claro, quizás como alguien que escribe, yo pienso como que produce o que divulga o que comparte, la verdad es que no
Sí,
tampoco
pero
lo
lo digo
entiendo.
por eso, porque tuvieron una evolución. O sea, Mary al principio el blog lo tenía fuera de la plataforma de la verdad divina y por lo tanto era como una ventana de querer expandirse más y querer recibir retroacción, pero al parecer el motivo era muy de herida, ¿no? De sentir, porque uno se siente desaprobado y pues que lo que hacemos normalmente es eso, ¿no? Todos.
Claro, sí,
Entonces
sí, sí.
salimos al mundo, pero desde la herida. Entonces sabía eso. Estaban y solo conversaron y parece ser que luego, o sea, se dio cuenta de esa motivación, porque de hecho ha cambiado, o sea, el blog ahora es una parte de la web y no puedes hacer comentarios, creo, ¿no?
Claro, sí, yo recuerdo, a ver, no ahora, en este momento, no tengo en el marco de qué video, recuerdo que lo menciona Jesús y que incluso menciona de esta opción que ellos no tienen de poner me gusta, no me gusta, y incluso de las preguntas tampoco, que no es la intención, claro. Y ahí
Pues
¿con
es
qué intención? Claro.
claro, pues yo creo que a lo mejor van por ahí, pero él no es seguro. Pero
Sí.
vamos, era por añadirlo. Vale,
Bueno,
venga, seguimos.
Talking about a changing in substance, you're talking about potentials being unlocked in me. But what are, I'm assuming it's a potential for more truth, a potential to experience more love. What's the benefits? Why would I want divine love?
Well, it's the potential for you to feel like God feels on literally every issue that you could ever raise. Mm-hmm. So, for example, when you look at a situation that you currently see as painful, once you've received divine love to the point of abandonment with God, you look upon that situation as God looks upon it. You would actually feel the way God feels about that situation.
So instead of feeling fear and pain, you might feel compassion and intense love.
And you'll feel completely different feelings.
Yes.
And as a result of that, you'll also feel the extreme happiness. Extreme happiness all the time. There'll be no limitation to your happiness because your happiness can continue to grow.
Yeah.
So I feel that the first positive benefit is the fact that eventually I will become like God in my feelings. Mm. Now, if a person imagines what that is, now it's very hard this is the problem with receiving divine love, is that most people do not desire things unless they know what the outcome is.
Yes.
Right. But the problem with receiving divine love is that, if we could say there is a problem, is that the majority of people on earth has no idea about what the possible outcomes are of receiving divine love. And as a result of that, they don't have an intense desire for it. Mm-hmm. Whereas if they understood all of the possibilities and truly felt them in their heart, they would not. It would be the thing they sought for the most in their life, not the least, or just as a side thought, or just as some kind of side idea. They would be totally and completely and utterly focused on actually wanting to have this love to that point. Yeah. They would not be distracted by any other things other than receiving this love, if they understood the benefits.
Yes. So you're saying one of the benefits is that at the point of at-one-ment with God, I will feel what God feels about any given situation.
And God is never sad.
No.
And God is always happy.
Yeah.
And God is always loving. So you will always be loving in every dealing you have.
And now, just to clarify that, then I've had people say, well, then I've lost my individuality. Where's the point? Where's my personality if I just become...
And I would argue that they're still not understanding what's being offered to them.
Yes.
Because what's being offered to them is a purification of their personality to its pure nature, mm-hmm. not an absorption into God.
Yeah.
Because we're still an individual. In fact, the more we progress in love, the more individual we become. That is what God designed us to be, an individual.
Yeah.
That's why the whole process of incarnation is called individualization. It's about creating an individual, you, and having this individual growing to a limited perspective if they don't want to receive divine love, or having the individual grow to an unlimited condition which will be dependent upon them continually receiving divine love, of course. Now, if they understood that their personality is never going to be lost in this, and the exercise of their will is never going to be lost in this process, then many people might seek for it more. But there is this common belief on the planet that when you connect with God, you give up your will, and you give all your will over to God. Now, of course, that doesn't sound very attractive to most people, and I can understand to a degree why that they don't feel that's attractive. And so, because they feel like their own personal nature will be absorbed, right? And that is not the case at all.
And a lot of people feel the colour and change and character of their life is defined by their highs and lows emotionally, and they don't have a sense that actually you can feel happy all of the time
and still express your personality.
And you'll be far more creative. And you will have a lot more character and vibrancy in your life.
Yeah.
You just won't be experiencing hardship or pain.
Correct.
Yeah.
So some other advantages as well are things like once we become one with God, we gain some of the qualities that God has. And one of those qualities is the ability to transport ourselves from place to place quite easily. We gain the quality of being able to sense and feel the individual, every individual that surrounds us, what their character is, what their nature is, what emotions they have within them, what history they have, without even having to talk to them. We have the ability to know them, truly know them, without having to actually converse with them. So that's a major ability that we gain once we become one with God.
Well, that is more than awareness, isn't it? We have an intense awareness, but it's not from. We actually also have a connection and a compassion with each individual as well. Would you say?
Of course, because the love itself generates compassion.
Yes.
It doesn't generate, though, a sadness within yourself. Mm-hmm. So while you know everything that's going on around you and you know all the reasons why people are making the choices around you, you still do not feel sad that they're making those choices, because you realise that those choices were based upon the gift of free will that God gave them, and you're completely in harmony with God's idea that that's a great thing.
Yes.
It's a great thing. They've been given free will, even the free will to create their own pain and suffering. Mm. They've been given as a gift. So, and you're completely in harmony with God with regard to the use of free will. You also have the ability to create. Now, at the time of inception of an idea or a concept. Mm-hmm. So rather than creating just by having to do physical effort all the time, you now have the ability to create around you, and physically create, I'm talking about, have things manifest around you through the process of your soul's engagement of desire. So that's how God creates. And we gain a lot of these gifts if we continue progressing towards God past the point of at-one-ment and continue after that point. We eventually gain a lot of these abilities that God has in our soul.
And so you're talking about creation happening just seamlessly as we have, and our emotions are in harmony with God. So as we have a loving idea, mm-hmm. And also in response to what we feel around us, because we have this awareness of everyone around us and we have a connection to them and a love for them, then every action we take is going to be in harmony with love of them and ourselves, mm-hmm. and our creations also will be in harmony with that.
Exactly.
So,
and we're not only creating here, we're creating in multi-dimensional spaces in the universe at the same time, and we're aware of that. It's not that we're unaware. We know that it's happening, and we know because we can visit those homes that we're creating, for example, and the spaces we've created, And we're able to visit it because now we have the ability not only just to think of ourselves in a human form, but we now have the ability to understand how the spirit body works and how I can see with my spirit body's eyes.
Más literalmente dice concebirnos o pensarnos a nosotros en una forma humana, que también puede valer como.
And I can, so all of these other advantages come to us automatically. Through this process of receiving divine love and having the soul transformed.
So thank you, given us a pretty compelling picture of like what it's like to be.
But to be honest, it's a very limited picture.
Sure.
You know, because if people understood how immense it was, for example, just the one concept of immortality, if people understood how immense that was, that one concept of immortality, knowing for certain that when you become at one with God, you will, right? When you become at one with God, you will always end up in this place of certainty on all subjects once you become at one with God. And knowing that everything you choose to do is certain, like the outcome is certain, if it's in harmony with love.
So it's certain in terms of love. It's not necessarily certain in terms of prophetic things you're talking about.
No, and I think this is a big misunderstanding most people have about receiving divine love. They have this sort of concept that when you receive divine love to one with God, you automatically have all the knowledge of the universe. Now, if you had, that would automatically make you God, and that's not the case. The reality is that once you become at one with God, you have the amount of knowledge you had just before you became at one with God, with just a touch more love in you that you're now at one with God. That's the reality. But the knowledge has the continue. You can continue to grow in your knowledge because it's love, God's love. In fact, the understanding of God's love is what actually operates the entire universe. So you're not able to discover anything more about the universe unless you become at one with God. So these six sphere spirits, for example, who have not received divine love, they're investigating all these different things about the truths of the universe. That's what they're focused on, the creation rather than creator, right? So they're focused on all of the different things that are happening in the universe, trying to learn more and more, but they're not realizing that they will not be able to learn more and more about it and know it for certain, because divine love is the thing they're going to need before they can understand it. Their soul needs to have grown into a different creature to understand it. The soul has to become more like God's soul in order to understand what God has actually done. And while you're holding on to the intellect, intellectual idea that you can understand God, right, without transforming your soul into God's nature, you're basically blocking any understanding of God and most understanding of the universe. So you have no opportunity in that place to completely understand the universe and what God has created, God's laws, and God himself. You have no opportunity to understand God either. The soul has to be developed in love, not our own love, but God's love, before we can understand those things. So there's whole groups of truths that are completely cut off from our understanding unless we receive divine love. And if we don't receive divine love, we can think we know, but we won't know. It won't be an actual, like Solomon says here, ownership. It won't be an ownership of our knowledge. It'll just be an opportunity to know, or an idea or concept of knowledge, but it won't be something that we actually own and feel, because it's impossible to without receiving divine love. And this is like, if people understood all of the issues surrounding receiving divine love and the importance of receiving divine love in their day-to-day life, if they truly want to understand everything, they wouldn't be worried about, doing this, doing that, making, fixing this, fixing. They wouldn't be worried about a lot of things in their day-to-day life as much as they would be concerned about embracing the principles of, and particularly embracing God's love into the soul.
Sure. So then I have a couple of other questions, clarifiers around what you're saying there. Basically, you're saying that as I receive, at the point of at one with God, then I have access to understanding from a completely different...
No, I'm not saying at the point of at one with God. I'm saying that divine love transforming the soul causes the soul to get to new understandings. Now, at the point of divine love being at one with God, that doesn't mean that we all of a sudden know everything. What it means is whatever we now know in the future, we can only know by receiving more love. We can't know it using any other mechanism.
Yes.
We can't know it, using a physical concept or trying to think about it or any of those things. We can't know it that way. And there's there's large amounts of the entire universe that God has created that it's impossible for us to know unless we continue to receive divine love.
Sure. Okay.
So it's not limited to the point of at one.
No. I was trying to give a clumsy summary of what you said, okay, so I can ask my next question.
All right, answer the question.
On Joanne Blogs again,
yeah.
And you've given me an amazing picture of what it's like when I've received God's love to the point of at one with God.
Mm-hmm.
And as Joanne, I can go, okay, well, that's all right, okay, that seems like a good idea. There's some incentive there. But what's it going to look like on this journey as I begin to receive God's love? Like, obviously, am I going to get there in the next fortnight, tomorrow, after one session of prayer?
Can you see even the desire to ask the question is already a lack of trust in the process?
Absolutely.
And this is where I feel a lot of people don't understand as well, that what they've just been told this amazing thing. They've been told this amazing thing. And the amazing thing is that your entire life and your entire future and your entire intellectual and knowledge and your awareness and the experiences of your entire life are completely dependent upon receiving divine love. Mm. And yet the next question most people ask are, what's it going to look like? What's it going to look like? And why do they ask that question next?
Because this is the next thing I wanted to raise with you.
Can we make the point though?
Sure.
Can I make the point?
Yeah, you go.
And the reason why they're asking these questions is because they don't believe it. Because if they really believed it, they wouldn't be asking any more questions.
Yeah.
They'd only want to know how, not what, but how they can receive love. They wouldn't want to know anything else once they fully understood the importance of love in their life. And I feel that's the problem that the majority of people that we speak to have, is that they keep asking what, why, who, where.
Yeah. Instead of how.
Instead of how.
And yes.
And then engaging the how, engaging the process of how. With faith. Well, we talked to a group of spirits this week, didn't we? Where they'd been listening to me speak on this subject for 1 year. So it's a fair time for spirits because they're hearing every conversation I have with every person. It's not like just a few conversations on the internet or anything. They're listening to every conversation I'm having with every person about the subject of divine love, and yet in 1 year they still haven't done anything about it. Mm-hmm. They were still asking what, why, when, who, and all the other things, instead of focusing on the how.
Yes.
And the reason why they did that was because they're afraid. And we have this terrible fear associated with, we have all these false beliefs associated with God. And that's where faith comes in.
Yes.
So a person is not going to pray unless they have some faith. And obviously developing faith is a very difficult process if you haven't received any divine love. So at some point you're going to start with a completely blank slate, having no love and divine love entered your soul. You might have development in natural love, but no divine love, because your will has to be engaged your conscious will has to be engaged in receiving divine love. And it has to be the will of the soul, not the will of your mind, that's engaged in receiving divine love. So that might not be engaged at all. And then you have no faith that God exists, no faith in a loving God, no faith that God cares about you as an individual, none of those things. So why are you going to have a longing under those circumstances? Well, for most people, that's the case. They don't have a longing because of all of those factors. But that's what depends on man. And what I wanted to do first in this discussion is focus on what depends on God first.
Sure.
And then what depends on man.
Yeah.
Because I feel that if people understood what depended, like the importance of receiving divine love in their soul, then a spark of desire will rise, and then they might desire to pray, at least to try the experiment. Yeah. But for the majority of people, they do not understand the benefits of divine love in their life. They haven't even intellectually become aware of the possible benefits of divine love entering their soul. And as a result of that, they never develop a desire to receive it, and they never work their way through issues of why they're not receiving it, and they never develop a longing to receive it, and they don't have any faith. And so, unfortunately, religious viewpoints and spiritual viewpoints all are developed by their own ideas and concepts, but they're not involved with God. So divine love is not transforming their soul. They're just trying to transform their soul using natural love techniques. Mm-hmm. And even the majority of people that have heard the divine truth are doing that still.
Yeah, even people who have an intellectual awareness. Are often still living in their fears. Yeah. So just one last question then, perhaps.
About the love.
About the love and the how of the love, how it's received. You said earlier that divine love does not remove the error from our soul. No. And I wanted to maybe come back to that point. I know we'll talk about it more in the prayer and faith section, but just the very fact that you're saying our will must be engaged, the love.
Can I point out to people, firstly, that statement? There's a lot of people who are going to feel that's in disharmony with the Padgett messages, but it's not. Error is an effect of causes that are in the soul.
Yes.
Divine love removes the causes that produce the error. That's what divine love does. So the error itself is not removed by divine love entering the soul. The cause of the error is removed by divine love entering the soul. And that's very different, right? Because for the majority of people, they don't understand the difference between cause and effect, but it's very important to understand. Sin is the effect of the soul acting out of harmony with love, and of a condition within the soul where the soul desires to act out of harmony with love. Because of the different emotions and feelings that the soul has. When divine love is received into the soul, then the causes of these particular degradations, if you like, of the soul are removed, right? And when the causes are removed, then the subsequent effect, sin, is no longer created.
It, in effect, just disappears without any effort.
It disappears without effort, yes. And if a person requires effort to change their behaviour on a certain issue, it means that the cause hasn't been removed. That means that they haven't received divine love on that particularly with that surrounding that particular issue, enough for the cause to actually be removed.
Thank you. That's such an important point, I feel.
Yeah.
And it's also something else about the workings of divine love. It's just how powerful this love is,
Yes.
is that it can enter us and actually almost dissolve.
It dissolves the cause of our acting out of harmony with love.
Now that's very powerful.
Yes.
For me personally,
Yeah.
and probably Joanne blogs.
because if you think about it from like a scriptural perspective or a religious perspective, what most religions on the planet are teaching us, that we have to try. We have to try hard to do this. We have to fight the evil and fight off everything, and we've got to try hard. The main reason why we have to try hard, unfortunately, is because divine love is not entering our soul and transforming the cause, and so we're always working against the cause. Like we know that we sin under that circumstance generally, and oftentimes we don't even know that we sin, but sometimes we know that we sin. And then where we know we sin, we know we're doing things out of harmony with love, but instead of trying to correct the cause, what we try to do is change the effects. So what we're trying to do is work against the soul's cause, the thing that exists in the soul that causes us to take those actions. Now, divine love doesn't work that way. Divine love enters the soul and starts transforming the soul at the causal level, not at the effect level. So divine love doesn't correct sin. Divine love corrects the cause of sin.
Which, wow, that's pretty powerful, isn't it?
Very powerful.
Because it means that in one cause can create a multitude of sin.
Of course.
If we dissolve that one cause, then our life can change.
And change markedly in short periods of time.
Yes, and so that's, you know, along the way, before we're even at one with God, as we begin to receive the love, there will be a softening, there will be a change, our life will begin to show evidence of this love.
Of the love having the change to the causes.
Yes.
Yeah. Now, of course, it is possible for us to still imbibe other errors into our soul that create other causes that we need to release.
Yeah.
So there are certain other things that we would also need to choose to do if we want to protect our soul from receiving new causes, if you like, within it.
Is this what you mean about acting in harmony with the love that we've already received?
Of course.
Yes.
Yeah, we must take action that's harmonious with the love we've already received once we've received it. But that action will be automatic unless we use our will counter to the automatic action that the love dictates.
So the love will draw us towards more love.
Yes, the love will draw us into a certain course of action that our fear then screams about, and then we realise, oh, we've got fear still. Right?
Yeah.
Now, once we become one with God, we will have no fear.
That will be, yes.
And that would be a beautiful state. There was no fear at all. But before that time, the soul's being drawn into act in harmony with love. And at the same time now, any fears that we have, we're going to go, I don't want to go in that direction, right?
Yeah.
And then we will need to choose to do something with these fears. And these fears have other causes.
Yes.
That if we receive more love, the transformational effect on those causes will happen, and these fears will start dropping off and disappearing.
And this is where I want to ask you an important clarifier about what you've just said. So you've just said to us that the love removes the cause.
Yes.
Now, you've also said that religion and a lot of other teaching out there is asking us to work on the effects of you know, the sins inside of us. Do better, try harder, fix it, and you'll be a good person. Now, what I observe is a lot of people who even listen to a lot of the videos that we produce and are attempting to follow this
the
way.
path, as they call it.
Yes. What I observe is a tendency to try to they've heard intellectually there's a cause.
Oh, well, they've heard, let's see if we can take it back further. They've heard intellectually that a certain course of action probably wouldn't be loving.
Sure, okay.
So in other words, they're looking at the effect of a certain course of action. They go, well, it wouldn't be loving. So what they then choose to do, using their will, they choose to not take that action in the future.
Yeah.
Well, that does nothing to the soul.
No.
Nothing.
Now, I do that, though, because I think if I know something...
Can I just correct that?
Yeah.
It does one thing to the soul.
Yeah.
It just prevents further damage to the soul on taking an action that's out of harmony with love.
So that's why I do it.
But it doesn't actually fix the cause of why we wanted to take that action.
Exactly.
That's out of harmony with love. It doesn't fix that.
So if I know something's out of harmony with love and I feel a desire to do it, then I do. I say, I'm not going to do that because I know that's going to lead to more error. But I also know there's a cause within me that drives that desire.
Exactly.
And unless I heal that, then...
Who heals it?
Well, this is exactly where I'm getting to.
Exactly.
Because I see a lot of us trying to heal the cause so then we can receive the love.
Yeah,
but what you've just said is we receive the love and that's what
heals the cause. And it's just our willingness and desire. Passion to receive the love to heal that cause, and our willingness to see the cause as that is the issue. We can't pray for repentance about an issue or a cause that we can't see.
Yes.
We need to see it and feel it. We need to feel how important it is. And when we feel how important it is and how great the issue is, we will desire love to come and heal that cause.
Yes, and I just feel this is where we talk a lot about humility and truth being the doorway to love. We must, from what you've just said, be humble to the fact that there's a cause there.
That there's an error in my soul
yes.
that's out of harmony with love, that exists in my soul, that is creating all sorts of trouble in my life.
That has a cause that's creating trouble.
That's got a cause that's creating trouble.
Yep, so I'm humble to the truth of that.
I'm humble to the truth of that. And I have to be willing to see it.
Yes.
Willing to notice it, willing to see how bad it is.
Yes. Yes.
Right? God's love can't do any of that for me.
No,
I've got to
be willing to feel what this thing is inside of me.
Exactly.
Actually, don't I? But it's not up to me to cure it. In fact, it's going to take me a long, long time to cure it on my own, isn't it?
Well, that's the natural love path. If you make it up to you to cure it on the natural love path, you'll cure it eventually. But it might take 100 years, sometimes with hard issues, thousands of years. We've seen people take tens of thousands of years for some issues. So, it's a very slow, laborious process. If you open in all those ways that I've just mentioned, and you're repentant and humble, and you see the cause and you want to change it, and you feel the need to change it, and you truly desire to change it, and pray for God's love to come and take this cause away from you, then God's love can do all of that work for you. And it will expose a lot of emotion in that process. You'll have to be willing to feel emotion. You'll have to be willing to cry. You'll have to be willing to go through different feelings, sometimes shame and other emotions too you might have to go through, and be willing to experience them. But if you're willing to do all of that, God can just get to that cause really rapidly and erase it. Yes. Like God's love erases it. And now that cause is not generating any negative effects anymore in your life. Now, I suggest to people if they haven't experienced that change, that fairly rapid transformational change, then they're still engaging the natural love path because they don't really understand what the divine love path is.
Yes, I feel a lot of people feel like, right, I have to tip out all the error, then God's love can enter me. And really what you're saying is it can be a dynamic process where God's love comes, triggers things. If we're humble, the error
Yeah, if
leaves
you
us
think
and
about
love
it from
connected
an
with
illustration
us.
perspective of a
Yes.
glass of water, if I'm willing to tip out error as the stuff's coming in, then I don't have to wait for the error to all be gone before I can receive love.
Yes.
Right? So I'm not saying, when I gave that illustration, I'm not saying you have to empty the glass completely before you receive love. What I'm saying is you have to have a willingness to let go of the error that causes you to not desire the love, and also to not have any faith in God, and not have any faith that you'll receive it when you ask, and also to work through the issues of why you resist it, why you resist the love. Now, obviously, if I've got a cap on there, God's love will never enter. If that's my soul, and I've got a cap on it, and I'm not allowing myself to experience emotion at all, God's love can never enter.
Sure.
God's love can only enter by me using my will to open up my soul. That's the operation of prayer, and we talk more about prayer in a minute. But the operation of prayer is to open up your soul so that now and also develop within you a willingness to tip out whatever is in it that's out of harmony with the love.
And from what you're saying, all I have to do is open my soul, ask for the love, and have a willingness to tip out. And at that moment, I can start to receive love.
Yes.
Not after I've even done any tipping, because as the love enters me, it's going to tip things out at a far more rapid rate.
If I'm willing.
If I'm willing. So this is the humility part of the equation.
This is the problem, is that people receive some divine love and receive some divine love and receive it a little bit more, but the love is now working against their will. Like when I say that they're willing to receive the love, but they're not willing to operate in harmony with the love they've received.
Yeah.
And when they do that, then they stagnate themselves. Then they can't receive any more divine love because they're operating in complete disharmony with receiving any more divine love.
Yeah.
So that is a big issue.
And on the flip side,
Pongo para que veamos que en inglés es mucho más cómodo el contraste, porque solamente cambian delante del esto. Entonces, por eso hay que hablar a veces de autodependencia, porque no podemos decir Dios dependencia o Dios suficiencia, ¿no? Pero en el inglés es muchas veces mucho más cómodo en eso. Es por eso escrito. Vale.
that, if you like. So there you're talking about people who are not willing to tip out and they're just asking for love, and that it gets stagnant because they don't have the willingness to.
Yeah.
On the other end, I see people trying to tip it out without involving God yet, because they feel like it's got to be tipped out before I can get some in. And it's actually doing...
But it's not only for that reason either. I feel from many that just addicted to self-reliance.
This is what I was going to say. That's self-reliant, isn't it?
Yeah, totally.
And God-reliance is when we ask for the love in this process constantly, all the time. We're in the experiment all the time. While we're growing the soul qualities and the soul character that we need to follow the way, we're always asking for the love.
Yes, always. And you will know generally when you receive it, because there will be emotional periods during the reception of this love where all of a sudden you become emotional about having received it. Mm-hmm. And those times are indications that you've received it. Now, if you're not receiving it, then you're not being honest. You're not being truthful with yourself. You're not being honest about whether you even have a pure desire to receive it. And this is where we need to get down to the other two aspects of Solomon's message. Yeah. So I feel at this point in time, what I would love for everyone to understand is that God's love is going to have such a powerful effect on your life that you, at this point in time, cannot even imagine what that powerful effect will be. No amount of words that I give you are ever going to help you understand how important this love is to you. No amount of words that I can ever say will be able to illustrate to you how important this love is to your future existence. So all I can do is assure you that there are literally billions of changes that are going to happen to your soul when you receive divine love. And all I can do is reassure you that it's the most important thing you could ever engage for your future existence. So maybe if we could sort of leave that part of Solomon's message there now, the importance of receiving the divine love. Like Solomon correctly says, it is the greatest thing in all of the universe that comes from God. Yeah. The greatest thing. Now, he's talking about greater than everything else you can ever imagine. That's what he's talking about. So it's the greatest thing you could ever do or receive from God.
And he's telling us that's what comes from God, but on the part of us, in order to get it, we need two things: prayer and faith.
So let's talk about prayer and faith.
Yeah. So can we talk about faith first?
Yeah, I feel so. But it's important to talk about faith first, because without faith, prayer won't even be engaged.
Yeah, yeah.
So we need to have at least some way of developing our faith, or some knowledge of what we're talking about when we're talking about faith. So what are we talking about?
What is faith?
Okay, so if we look at faith, or the lack of it, and sometimes looking at the lack of it is a way to measure what it means to help define it. Yeah. So if we look at the lack of faith would be that I have no concept whatsoever and no idea that God exists. No concept whatsoever that God's got any love to give me. No concept whatsoever that my soul can be transformed by receiving divine love. No concept whatsoever that, there's any process that I can engage with God. Now, ironically, this is the condition that the majority of humanity find themselves in, even if they're religious, because they don't understand this divine love, the power of the divine love. Mm-hmm. They want to believe in my sacrifice, for example, as their saving that saves them from their sins, or they want to believe that worshipping 6 times a day to God is the way to save them from their sins. Or do you know what I mean? Yeah. There's all sorts of practices that people engage on the planet. If you're looking at a New Age person, they're thinking that there'll be some kind of energy of the universe which is God. That not an entity, but an energy of the universe which is God, that's going to come and somehow transform them in some way. None of that is true. And the problem with all of those belief systems is they prevent us from having any faith in what is true. Mm. That's the problem of belief systems. So you're saying if we have faith in things that aren't true, it actually degrades our faith. Yeah, really. It works against the operation of what we need to engage if we're going to receive divine love. Mm. It doesn't work. Work in harmony with it, it works against it. Yeah. This is the power of our belief systems. Mm. Our belief systems exercised in a direction that's untruthful causes so much opposition to love and even to our concepts that we don't even try the experiment. Yeah. Because we don't believe the experiment exists. Yes. And we don't believe we need it. So if I speak to an average Christian, for example, the average Christian believes the only thing they need to do to get a relationship with God is to believe in the sacrifice of Jesus, right? And to live in harmony with the moral precepts of what they see as Christianity. That's all they feel they need to do. And I'm saying, no, that is not going to ever make you one with God, ever. And the problem with holding on to that belief is that you're not going to try to become at one with God, ever, probably. because you're going to hold on to this belief that somebody else has saved you and created your relationship with God. For the average Muslim, they believe that praying to Allah regularly every day, living their life in harmony with the moral precepts of the Quran is going to help them become at one with God. I'm saying no, it won't. No, it won't. To become at one with God, you must receive divine love. It's the only thing you can do to become at one with God. You can't do anything else. The average New Age person believes that they can become at one with the universe, right, through a process of energetic healing and other things. I'm saying, no, I'm sorry, this is not true. You cannot do that. You will never become at one with God like that. It's pointless even doing that, in fact, is what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that unless you have the correct concept of God and the correct concepts about God himself, how will you ever receive enough love from God? Because you'll always imply incorrect concepts to God. Right? So
you're saying our faith has to be grounded in the truth about God and God's nature.
Exactly. It has to be grounded in truth. And truth is logical. It's not stupid. The truth is not illogical. It makes reasonable sense. Like, I have taught nothing in history that does not make reasonable sense. Right? The reality is the distortions of my teachings, which are contained in the Bible, are totally unreasonable. They're totally, of course, they make no logical sense. And any person who analyses it with a clear mind will see that, and so therefore doesn't believe it. And then they assume that that's the God that I'm talking about, and it's not. Like, the God I'm talking about is logical, reasonable. The God I'm talking about is the creator of our universe. She understands everything about the universe, including how we're made. Everything.
It's not mysterious.
It's not mysterious. And so every time I'm addicted to the mystery, I am not connecting to this God. I am not connecting to the creator of the universe. Because the creator of the universe wants to explain everything to us, wants to give us the truth of everything. And every time we are illogical, we are being completely out of harmony with the creator of the universe, because the creator of the universe is completely logical in every single thing he does.
So our faith then is based in the truth about God's nature. It's always logical.
Yes.
And this is the kind of faith that we can hope to build when we're working with.
Well, the problem with faith is there's other problem with faith, and that is it will build as we grow in a relationship. But why do we begin the relationship?
Well, this is where we have to trust in something.
You've got to trust in something.
Don't we?
You've got to take a risk.
Yes.
You've got to take a risk that God is this God that I'm portraying, not this false God that the world's religions have portrayed, not the false God that the world's anti-religions have betrayed, not the false God that people like New Age movement and other movements like that have portrayed, but rather this God
es que se parece mucho a la palabra betrayed y portrayed, es así. Y no sé si en la primera dice también que no es que las religiones lo hayan traicionado, sino el que retratan, el falso Dios que retratan esas religiones. Luego las antirreligiones directamente lo traicionan, digamos, aunque también hay un sentido de traición al retratar lo falso. Bueno, da un poco lo mismo, pero eso, que quede esa, da igual.
Okay.
En la transcripción pues es lo que venía, pero si ahora se escucha hay que poner el oído más, pero bueno, eso no habría que ver.
Para los que saben inglés, sí. Yo...
Sí, no, y a mí se me queda grabado muy poco porque no lo hablo, pero de entender así, y ahora me ha parecido. Pero bueno, eso, que es un detalle, no importa. Vamos para adelante.
You love and have a personal relationship with you. We need to, at some point, trust that.
Yes.
And if we don't trust it, we'll never begin to develop a desire to pray.
So you're also then saying that our faith will involve initially a sense of risk.
Yes, but it's not a high risk because the logical argument would dictate us taking the risk.
Well, now this is if we engage our intellect to help us, isn't it?
Yes, but we have to engage it with a clean slate. We have to engage our intellect, our logical argument, with this feeling inside of us that we're willing to accept the truth even though it's not our religious belief. That we're willing to accept the truth even though the Quran or the Bible or some other book doesn't say it. That we're willing to accept the truth logically that many of these books do not have in them. They have complete illogical arguments about God. And what we need to do is be able to give up these illogical arguments that we have about God and accept the logical arguments about God.
And because we have so many emotions attached to our history, to our upbringing, to all of our history and our upbringing. And our living in a society that approves of us and all of those issues. All of those things are actually attached to different belief systems that we have. That cause us to believe false things about God. Yeah. So everything's going to get challenged in this process. Well, and this is why I feel engaging the experiment daily can feel challenging and risky and strange initially because we... See, again, I would argue, though, that if it feels challenging, risky and strange, it's only because...
Aquí dice algo más fuerte. Jesús dice, ahora discutiría eso que está diciendo. O sea, yo diría, pero no dice solo yo diría, sino discutiría eso, o sea, contradiría eso, argue, que sea.
Because of errors that exist in our soul that are emotional, that cause...
De hecho, van a tener que parar, que seguramente por esto. Así que vamos a poner un poco más para
atrás. To feel that it's risky. See, again, I would argue.
Y ver cómo...
And risky and strange initially because we...
See, again, I would argue, though, that if it feels challenging, risky and strange, it's only because of errors that exist in our soul that are emotional that cause us to feel that it's risky, strange and challenging.
That's what I was trying to say. Because we have all these emotions in us,
exactly.
It's going to feel like this.
It's got nothing to do with whether it is actually risky. How can it be risky? Like the reality is we've got the creator of the universe that is saying to us personally, I want to have a relationship with you. And he's saying to us personally, I'm a loving person. I'm better than every one of you down there. You know, I'm a better person than any one of you can conceive at this point in time. Trust that I am. Look, I created your body. I created things like happiness, love, sex, and other pleasures that you have. Surely you can see that if I created such things, that I must be better than any one of you, right? Because what do you create? You go and create pain and suffering and other things, you know, like that's what you create. So I'm better than that. I'm a better God than that. And God's constantly showing through the universe to us, if we're willing to see, that God is actually far better than what we imagine God to be.
And really, when we have faith in the truth about God, we have faith that God's not expecting us to be perfect before he loves us.
No, God lets us make mistakes all the time.
God's okay with mistakes.
Yeah.
Now, see, most people do not have that emotion within them because of their upbringing. But if we have faith,
and you can see why in their upbringing, because when they were a child, every time they made a mistake, usually they got punished or humiliated or pulled down in some way. So, of course, when they become an adult, they're just absolutely petrified of making a mistake. God lets us make any mistakes. Like, why wouldn't a loving parent let you make a mistake and go, oh. Now you're receiving the results of that mistake through, you know, the law. You're receiving the results of that mistake. So change it and don't make the same mistake again.
Yeah. That doesn't mean that you're, you know, that you're not going to get the love.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
And so this, I suppose, is what faith can give us, is if we have faith that's based in the truth about God's nature, then it challenges the errors that we have inside of us
automatically
about love automatically. Yeah. And we, even though it might feel a little strange, faith will actually give us the will to ask for love if we feel like we don't know what this is going to be like or we don't even think we deserve it. but faith will actually draw us over that point and begin and have us begin to ask.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that?
Yeah. Can I just stop our discussion for a moment?
Yeah.
Esto es muy sorprendente, acaba muy bruscamente y creo que Miller estaba notando a Mary que nosotros no lo estábamos viendo en ese momento muy claramente, a lo mejor no se nota mucho, pero el tono de voz quizás se va notando más. Y
Claro.
en el siguiente empiezan hablando de eso, de que han tenido que parar, que Mary ha tenido un buen lloro, como solemos decir ahí, que no es contento con esa expresión, pero fíjate, lo que vimos nosotros de la sensibilidad y todo esto, creo que era del 2015, ¿verdad? En 2015 sí que estaban ahí haciendo todo más, o sea, como que fue en todo un recorrido, sí que parece que se permitían sentir más. También es que el tema era más peliagudo. Bueno, que tengo que ir al servicio, comentamos un poco y vemos a ver cómo estamos.
Ok.
¿Estás por ahí? ¿Has tenido que ir? Sí.
Acá estoy, sí, ya estoy.
Ah, no, has tenido que ir también, no ve tranquilamente.
No, no, estoy bien. Estoy bien.
Pues, bueno, impresionante, ¿no? Supongo que estamos... Que por
A
mucho...
mí, sí sentía, Iván, justo en el video que en realidad no llegué a subir, termino hablando que te comenté antes del principio de permanencia y un poco todo lo que Jesús va argumentando de la confianza, ¿no? Acá sobre todo en la última parte cuando habla de la fe, porque hablé justamente de la falta de fe o la fe en el error. Y por supuesto que como vengo experimentando así, que se hilvana, digamos que es un eslabón más, en realidad todo está conectado con todo. Pero sí, es maravilloso. Parece que lo hubiéramos sabido siempre, o sea, en el sentido de que, entre comillas, no es una novedad, pero cómo el énfasis te lo da, lo deja muy claro, ¿no? Y que nos ha pasado de querer resolver esto, de buscar las causas, de todo lo que describen en el proceso del amor natural, sí, como que al final siempre no eligiendo la opción de amor divino, por decir, manteniendo esa autosuficiencia.
Sí,
Claro.
entonces, lo que vamos a hacer es, esperamos no olvidarnos ya, centrarnos en esto, porque realmente está como dice, o sea, es efectivamente, o sea, funciona así. O sea, cuando entra es más claro todo, te das más cuenta de lo peligrosa que además que es la arrogancia y todo eso. Pero fíjate qué curioso es este mensaje. Voy a poner otra vez la pantalla. Es de los mensajes así de Padgett y todo eso, no hay casi transcripciones. Y este sí las tiene. Y de hecho, bueno, como vídeo es excepcionalmente más visitado que lo normal. De esta tanda de cosas tiene 8.000 y pico, que no suele ser así para estos. Hay vídeos del tema de Padgett, mucho menos. Y es que en la segunda parte van a ir hablando de la oración. ¿Te acuerdas que vimos un primer audio grabado con el texto que ofrecía la traducción, que no era muy buena? Oficialmente estaba traducido una pequeña introducción a la oración del amor divino. Pues creo que era el 2005. Pues la verdad es que ahora pienso, lo tenía que haber hecho mucho antes, pero bueno, todo es por hemos estado viendo muchas cosas pero contiene en la segunda parte, que es mucho más larga, pues es un paso a paso por la oración. Y bueno, en general aquí ahora mismo, bueno, quería haber comentado eso al principio, pero se me ha olvidado, así que ahora, qué curioso es eso, ¿no? Que ellos deben estar bastante atentos o contentos de esta conversación, en el sentido de haber dicho, no, si haces transcripciones la gente en inglés, que las hacen voluntariamente, se supone, cada vez en teoría iban a involucrar aparatos y cosas para hacerlas más rápido, pero parece que eso no ha funcionado porque no siguen montando muchas transcripciones, parece. Pero parece que eso, que si están las transcripciones de estos precisamente, es por esto. Porque ves cómo contiene tantas claves y nos vamos a centrar en... Te han dado muchas ganas, ¿no?, al escuchar esto
Totalmente.
¿verdad? Pues eso, esa oración.
Ánimo. Pero así como eso, como decías recién, esa claridad de comprender, vos sabés que tenía un poco de desánimo, Iván, creo que más los espíritus, desánimo en el sentido de justamente de no poder sentir, había percibido esa meseta, lo hablamos por ahí un poco, de aquella oportunidad en la que reconozco quizás fue tanta la intensidad y tan maravillosa la profundidad que no volver a vivirlo, ¿no? Y claro, como él claramente lo dice, o sea, amor divino y voluntad en este sentido, y como lo dejó claro en ese video de la sensibilidad, Dios respeta nuestra voluntad por sobre todas las cosas.
Y ¿sabes qué es lo que pasa? Que te estás dando cuenta, y esto es un ejercicio maravilloso de ser consciente. Ahora ya le vamos a poner nombre. Hemos estado actuando a la contra en muchas ocasiones, ¿no?, del amor divino ya recibido. Suponemos que en aquel primer momento que tuvimos, casi a la par, de sentir más allá de todos los conceptos lo que es el arrepentimiento.
Exacto, sí,
Y
eso.
como que inconsciente, era una cosa más inconsciente y menos. Pero ahora ya, según... A mí me sirve, por ejemplo, como os contaba ayer, que ayer tuve casi mi primera recepción consciente, que me sirve, por ejemplo, son tonterías, pero taparme los oídos y para hablar ahí y decir, vale, ahora yo sé que no lo deseo, ¿no? Y sentir ese no desearlo y sentirlo muy sutil, como gestos que nos ayuden a cada cual a perdonarnos, entre comillas, que no es el sentido, perdonarnos el hecho de que realmente no es sincero el deseo de ese amor, porque en realidad no estamos concienciados, pero ahora sí un poco más, ¿verdad?, con esta charla que nos ha echado, que merece la pena ver el final, como nos habla de frente a la cámara. No tenéis ni idea de lo que supone. Y es cierto.
Sí, es así, sí, aparte, o sea, cómo escogemos, como lo deja muy claro, el camino largo, seguir manteniendo el control, que ya varias veces nos dijo sobre las emociones, claro, todo eso que hace a las heridas, que el miedo más grande que tenemos, justamente es de confiar en Dios, qué paradoja. Sí.
Y el tema impactante de la causa, que que es una verdad que de alguna manera está revoloteando en otras revelaciones, en otras historias. No, la causa irá por la... O sea, de repente se te ha aclarado ahí, ¿no? Cuando ha pasado por ahí.
Yo recordé, Iván, cuando en esa parte, ¿sabes qué recordé? Cuando él hace la oración en el 2005 para los espíritus y trata de explicarle a los espíritus de una forma como es constantemente didáctica en Jesús. Entonces, en la oración incluye detalles de por qué apelar a ese amor a los espíritus, ¿no? Que están acompañándolo.
Sí.
Y es una suerte de recorrido panorámico, digamos, de cómo viene el proceso. Y recordé, asocié que en realidad me di cuenta que estaba queriendo irme a buscarla, porque la hicimos en grupo, pero también está el texto en tu sitio, porque automáticamente asocié a esto que él dice, que si bien está en la oración del amor divino, pero en esa oración él les habla a los espíritus, le pide cómo pedir ayuda para generar estas condiciones para poder recepcionarlo. Y me hizo acordar un poco, claro, y cómo en realidad es mucho más, claro, es simple todo lo que elocuente, digo, a escucharlo a él tan tan devanando así y pasito por pasito, porque yo siento un poco que Mary, que no sé si es la hipótesis, pero me sirve haber visto el otro, el de la sensibilidad, cuando termina con esta afirmación que es la fe la que va a hacer esto, que es la fe, yo resoné de nuevo con esta idea de que otra vez estamos tercerizando de alguna forma en el sentido de que no vemos nuestra voluntad hasta dónde soy yo el que está haciendo, o sea, esta creación, soy yo el que está participando, porque en eso yo siento que me sirvió mucho el de Mary, para mí resultó el anterior, el de la sensibilidad, sumamente un regalo así oportuno. Igual ahora no, ahora con esa combinación anterior y esto que dice AJ, que todo el tiempo y con mucha descripción. No pensé que iba a dar para tanto el mensaje cuando empezó a hablar. Wow, o sea, sí.
En realidad es la esencia del mensaje es por qué hay tantas miles de horas de vídeos de ellos. Es por esto.
Claro,
En
sí.
realidad, todo lo que hemos visto lo hacen precisamente para que esto quede claro. Por eso este dura 2 horas y media en el fondo, o 2 horas 40, porque este dura 1 hora y 5. Yo creía que era menos y creía que el posterior era menos. Y el siguiente, donde terminan de hablar de la fe, que tengo preparado solo para terminar lo de la fe, que ahora vemos si descansamos un rato, hacemos otro vídeo a lo mejor para esos 40 minutos, pero no. Esto, luego 1 hora entera con la oración, pero es poco en el fondo, porque en realidad son las miles de horas, en realidad el propósito de ellas es esto. Fíjate que también ahora se me ocurre al ver esto, no sé si lo pensaba ayer, que teníamos que haber hecho bien también despacio en todo el taller de causa y efecto. Pero además yo cuando lo vi también en inglés, yo captaba menos todavía, aunque no me entra en inglés de todas maneras si no lo hablo, pero de los que vi que capté ese cacho tan fundamental de donde pinta el alma, no sé qué, aunque es que en esos talleres es desesperante porque le interrumpe muchísimo y él se deja porque es al principio que ese era el estilo. Pero eso, o sea, que nosotros, que fíjate que lo teníamos ya muy bien remarcado también en el esbozo aquel de amor natural, amor divino, no sé qué, no sé cuántos, pero qué importante es, por ejemplo, eso. ¿Y esto a qué leches le estaba diciendo?
No, bueno, no sé, yo lo que quería decir era que ahora que hablas de causa y efecto, la misma que sí te llegué a comentar, la misma sensación tengo yo con el deseo, la ley del deseo, porque claro, ¿qué pasa? Que yo decía, ¿qué pasa que no lo estoy pudiendo poner en desarmonía con la condición de mi alma? Pero sí estoy deseando, porque lo que vivo es lo que deseo. Entonces yo dije, bueno, esas cuestiones, como decir, que vemos cuando estamos, digamos, experimentando desde ese lugar, pues yo siento un poco que esta lógica verdad y emoción que van juntos, experimentando en todo sentido, digo, llevando a lo que siento y a lo que voy comprendiendo con el camino del amor natural, por supuesto, todavía así como más lento, minucioso, pero yo decía, bueno, así como ahora surge lo que vos decís, qué importante la ley de causa y efecto, y yo sentía eso porque digo, bueno, vale, conozco la ley de atracción, me estoy involucrando, pero en la base, o sea, estoy deseando, o sea, ahora me tengo que ir al otro punto porque realmente voy a estar todo el tiempo ensayo, error, haciendo daño, sobre todo haciendo daño. Eso es lo que más me preocupaba, ¿no?
Claro, y el truco es lo que decíamos, pero que es difícil porque es demasiado simple, que es el realmente no dejar de pedirlo como un niño pequeño, es decir, porque es que, pero, o sea, ponerse a pedirlo y decir, vale, quiero sentir, o sea, empezar a sentir el deseo de no desear. O sea, es que hay mucho deseo de no desearlo como un niño pequeño. Entonces hay muchos ahí, pero la oración es esa. Entonces,
claro.
Me abro a sentir por qué, o sea, porque no tengo esa fe, ¿no? Entonces, fíjate, ya no ha sido impresionante también lo sintético que van por el tema de, a ver, la fe basada en la verdad, pero ahora estamos centrándonos en el hecho de la posibilidad de recibir amor divino. Entonces hay que centrarse en una verdad de Dios que la hemos visto desde los primeros meses, en los primeros talleres que hemos visto. La verdad acerca de Dios, no sé qué, que son cosas súper simples, pero es que, claro, no nos damos cuenta hasta qué punto tenemos todo hecho un lío ahí, mezclado los padres y Dios,
Sí.
la sociedad.
Bueno, yo asocié lo último que dice Mary, de no creernos merecedores, o sea, que él explica, claro, que el error, nos enseñaron que no el error y que condena, que el error conlleva una condena. Y bueno, justamente la vergüenza, que es una de las heridas que yo tengo de mí, que de alguna manera también lo muestra con Elvira, en ese video de la idea de que el amor puede ganarse y destituye totalmente, porque no conocemos a Dios, entonces no conocemos, claro, esto que Él nos está ofreciendo, pero no sé, ya de todas maneras posibles. Y claro, subyace entonces mi elección es básicamente, siento un poco en esa proyección que hago de que no me creo merecer, pero tampoco, como decías vos en un momento en el grupo, tampoco somos lo suficientemente humildes para no sentir para sentir ese no merecimiento, para liberarlo. Entonces, claro, ahora comprendo que así yendo de esa manera a cuentagotas y todo un poco intelectual también, y claro, sí, era como que, por eso digo, es como que no sabía esto y es como que te lo dije desde el principio, un poco así, ¿no?
Sí.
Y claro, qué maravilloso. Ujú. Incluso siento que a mi oración, esta viene hoy así, como así, porque es así, cuando uno desea, bueno, llega y algo así, porque era un poco como me sentía ayer también. Mm.
Sí. Y parece una tontería, por ejemplo, de la cosa que decíamos a veces y que se siente muy clara, de cambiarle madre o padre cuando uno se dirige interiormente a Dios, que sabemos que en realidad los guías celestiales y Dios están ahí a la que salta de nuestras aperturas para darnos algo. Entonces, solo el hecho, creo que ha tenido más importancia a lo mejor de lo que pensamos, el hecho de hablar de tú a tú, pero por ejemplo no solo como Padre mío, Padre nuestro, sino también Madre, no es una tontería.
No,
Porque como tenemos además tan sacralizadas a las madres, no queremos que sea realmente nuestra madre alguien que no conocemos porque no conocemos nuestra alma y se nos ha anestesiado durante todo el está más que anestesiado, se nos ha y la hemos permitido que se machaque. Todos estamos en la misma en ese sentido.
sí, Sí, y decía, bueno, que justamente fue el proceso de arrepentimiento el que inicia, digamos, la intensidad de la experiencia sobre todo, pero como en esta meseta, en la que me sentía, ¿no? Como que estaba así, seguramente la fachada, un poco lo que decía, todo lo que, el sistema de creencias, todos los obstáculos, las heridas, ni hablar de esas heridas ancestrales, y como uno cree que debe ir paso por paso, otra vez la fachada en realidad, ¿no? Tratando de regular y de administrar el proceso, que en definitiva es una fe en el error.
Sí, y no involucrar a Dios
Exacto, sí,
taponando
sí.
miedo en el fondo al yo real
Ajá,
que está detrás de la fachada, que es lo creado por Dios, el alma.
claro,
Sí,
wow,
pues
súper.
claro,
Pensando, Iván, que si uno intenta huir del dolor, porque suponte no queremos ser abrumados, pero no tenemos idea del dolor que está generándose de manera constante al escoger ese camino, digamos, porque más allá de que, como dice él, en algún momento podés llegar a la esfera, a la condición de humano perfecto, pero que quedan, y él lo cuenta siempre, ¿no? Cuando habla de quienes habitan la esfera 6 por milenios, por no procesar esas emociones, que en realidad está sostenido todo el tiempo, o sea, no es un calvario, el contrario, es lo que estamos creando nosotros acá, por no hacerlo así.
claro, pues esto es, parece que lo más importante que empezamos a incorporar mucho estas cosas de la preparación del alma, que eso cuando terminemos de ver, cuando sea esta semana, el de la oración también, cuanto antes quizá mejor,
Sí,
hay unos mensajes más creo que ya son del 2017, donde habla un poquito, y tampoco es que hagan un tratado como siempre, de ese tema de la preparación, y esos no tienen transcripción, pero para que nos den pie para sentir más esas historias.
sí,
Lo que pasa es que, bueno, lo importante es centrarse, no perder ahora la, la experiencia y para no perderla la que hemos tenido, hay que tener más
claro,
y tener muy centrado que todo es lo que hemos dicho. Has sacado el deseo fundamental, o sea, desear y ponerse realmente a rezar aunque no tengamos ganas, por así decirlo, es que no sé cómo decirlo.
claro, sí,
Para ver, porque ya tenemos la teoría es la práctica, o sea, la teoría es inserta directamente en la práctica, está insertadísima, porque nada más que nos ponemos a practicar, ya estamos viendo que no creemos que nos vaya a servir. Entonces, esa creencia es una emoción, tiene detrás una emoción, entonces. Y entonces, decir dentro de nosotros con la voz, aunque no se escuche, quiero ayudarme a sentir, porque hay guías celestiales ayudándonos. Y es muy importante que recibamos amor divino, como nos ha dicho. O sea, ayúdame a sentir esa emoción. O sea, es que podríamos estar, como dice él siempre, y yo gracias a lo de ayer o sea, dices, claro, es que podríamos estar todo el rato
todo el rato.
recibiendo en esta relación. Y es muy fuerte. O sea, cuando lo recibes, luego seguramente tienes alguna percepción del estilo, te das cuenta de las inercias de otra manera.
Ujú,
Aunque a la vez te perdonas más, como te das cuenta y como ya estás actuando en desarmonía con quizá un poquito más de amor divino que tienes, eso va a llevar a mucho más dolor al final. Pero bueno, te das
claro,
cuenta y casi como que inconscientemente te salen otros gestos, otro actuar en la vida y otra esperanza, digamos, otra forma más liviana pero que parte de una cosa que hasta ahora, hasta hace muy poco, ha sido todo intervención de espíritus. O sea, si estas mismas palabras se las decimos a alguien nueva era, las va a entender, pero las va a llevar a un tema que creo, casi seguro, es donde estábamos. O sea, creo que es así tan claro que ya lo vemos, ¿no? O sea, se lo vamos a ir a atribuir a espíritus, en la mayoría de casos de los que estoy hablando. Lo que en realidad son estas palabras que casi no cambian nada. Podemos estar diciendo exactamente las mismas palabras y no tener nada que ver. Es que es increíble eso. Darse cuenta es brutal. Y ten muchísima fe en que te puedes dar cuenta. O sea, en cuanto recibas ahora con más tranquilidad, es que me pasó ayer y nos va a pasar a todos. Nada que sigamos con eso, centrándonos en la oración, vemos un poquito de verdad en lo que sea, pero ya con este foco de todo lo que ha venido aquí diciendo.
Sí.
Cuanto hagamos eso, es que debe estar muy claro, pero muy clarísimo. O sea, te llega un poquito de eso, donde te empiezas a abrumar, a lo mejor no dejas abrumar, pero sí que te sale el error y entonces rezas para, vale, admito que tengo esto, no quiero huir de ello, celebras el haber encontrado ese error. Por ejemplo, ayer a mí era el tema de, en cuanto me vino un poco de empezar a llorar de una forma increíble, pero poquito, o sea, era el error de cuánta responsabilidad conlleva esto. Da miedo, da como miedo porque sabes que te exige, entre comillas, aunque no exige, pero para tú, como eres ya alma y tienes ya la sustancia de Dios en ella, y seguir recibiendo esa, es como algo muy grande. Entonces, le sientes eso, entonces sientes el error, entre comillas, que es la creencias erróneas en torno a la responsabilidad que es, en el sentido antiguo de responsabilidad. Y entonces ahí te abres y sigues. Yo no seguí mucho, pero me intenté quedar más y un poco, y estuve así un rato, pero eso, o sea, es todo tal cual. Es como...
Claro, ves que es un poco, siento que lo que dice intenta, 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 o sea, es justamente sí,
Sí,
ensayo error de pequeño.
Y cuando nos venga, acordarse de esto, de que es todo muy sutil, de que la creencia, no tenemos que caer en, si nos sentimos mal, pues lo que intentamos hacer con el trabajo emocional sin involucrar a Dios, pero eso mismo se va a reflejar cuando vaya a estar Dios más presente cada vez. Va a estar lo mismo, ese trabajo de decir, no, pero es que ahora tengo que sentir, tengo que ser humilde con esta creencia, es decir, vale, aceptarla, tengo. O sea, esto lo digo porque, o sea, en esos momentos va a ser lo mismo, pero cuando se involucra, cuando es claro que está involucrado Dios, es mucho más, no sé cómo decir, es mucho más claro todo. Y sí, más fuerte, pero es que es muy raro, porque es más fuerte, pero a la vez es más tierno y más sutil. Es más, sí.
Sí, sí, se percibe el cuidado, siento yo, de alguna forma, el cuidado en el sentido justamente de la compañía y la asistencia, ¿no?
Claro, por eso
Y
tiene ese punto al final donde hablan del riesgo y le tiene que cortar casi a Mary. No le corta, pero le dice, no, pero no estoy de acuerdo.
claro, sí, sí. Yo ahí percibía como que de alguna forma la percepción era que tiene que ver con el proceso de uno, como uno ve, que es lo que, bueno, Mary también nos muestra y nos regala ahí en el de la sensibilidad, digamos, pero que elocuente la forma en que, como uno lo habla, que por eso nos sirve tanto hablar entre nosotros, porque podemos de alguna forma retroalimentarnos también al compartir y que sigue siendo un regalo, más allá de poder ver el error, es algo maravilloso.
Pero eso, nada, ahí centrarnos mucho en que parece que no va a servir, y sentir esa creencia de que parece que no ha servido, parece que yo no, que para qué, ¿no? Que ya da igual todo, con lo mal que está todo, ¿no? ¿Para qué voy a hacerlo? Sentir esas sensaciones de ridículo, claro, todo eso. Entonces,
Bueno,
bueno,
yo noté, por ejemplo, en el cambio en mí y respecto a la herida de vergüenza que proyecto en mi relación con Dios, que lo contaba en una conversación que tuvimos, creo que estábamos grabando, que fue hace poco, que yo empecé a atravesarla, un poco lo que estás diciendo en este momento, ¿no? O respecto del error, intentar y recordar algunas otras experiencias que comparte Jesús cuando habla del miedo, de cómo él procesó el miedo a lugares donde había muchas personas y hacerlo así amorosamente. Y claro que sí, va a estar ahí, va a estar el miedo, por supuesto, pero esa perseverancia y así amorosidad para con nosotros mismos, claro, de seguir intentando, aunque no lo creamos al principio, tal cual.
pero fíjate que tiene que basarse en eso, esa verdad que tanto ha insistido en ella, que es tan sencilla, que viene de fuera del alma, del amor divino, y que no es nada que ver con lo que pensamos normalmente.
Sí.
Son cosas así súper simples que nos va a venir bien recordarlas. Y claro, la oración está para recordarnos ese tipo de cosas. Aunque en concreto esta de que Dios es una entidad con la cual relacionarse, pues es en realidad lo que subyace a toda la oración. Pero no la dice ahí una y otra vez tan claramente, o como lo vimos en el de comunicarse con Dios, o en otros, cuando ha hablado de la interacción y pinta el alma de Dios y el alma humana. Llega incluso para pintar el alma de Dios, aunque no se pueda, por así decirlo, aunque tampoco el alma, ¿no? No se puede pintar nada, pero igual que las palabras no significan en realidad. O sea, no tienen que ver con lo que representan. Pero
Claro, sí, él lo dice, claro, es algo tan poderoso, indescriptible prácticamente, en palabras, sí.
Bueno, pues si quieres dejamos de grabar y ahora vemos cómo...
Bueno,
Vale,
gracias,
pues,
Iván. Muchas gracias.
Gracias a ti y despídete de tu amado público.
Realmente funcionó como una inyección de emoción. Hermoso.
De ganas,
Sí, muchas gracias
de
a
deseo
quienes
de...
nos Sí, sí, eso. Sí, totalmente.
Muy bien, pues vamos a ver
Gracias.
qué tal.